Infrastructure is crumbling and the problems are only getting worse. The pressure to find solutions is hot. Let's talk about why American cities have no water, no electricity, and no money to fix their infrastructure problems. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast, hosted by Chad Smelter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. My name is Chad Smelter. I am your host. Today's guest is Jonathan Gano, who is the Public Works Director for the City of Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you for joining me, Jonathan.
Sure thing. My pleasure.
Jonathan, you've been an engineer since you were in the Army. What have you liked about engineering? How did you decide that was going to be the career path you wanted to go in? Let's start from there.
Sure. I landed in engineering because I like to solve problems, and that's one of the ever-present needs in our world is the schools inevitably steer steer kids in different directions, and I latched on to solving real world problems as kind of what I wanted to do forever. And I like the challenge of creative problem solving and thinking of ways to solve problems and how to get those kinds of things done. I wandered into the Army almost by accident, but it was a good 8-year run on active duty as a combat engineer, which has nothing to do with actual engineering. It's more landmines, barbed wire, and explosives. But enough civil engineering that it qualifies as that I could use my civil engineering degree from the military academy to apply for and take the test for engineering licensure. And then as I was leaving the Army, a friend of mine in the Public Works Department in the city where I was deciding to settle said, "Hey, you should apply for this opening in our Public Works Department." And that launched an almost 20-year tenure now in 2 different public works departments in 2 different cities.
Wow. That's so you didn't have anything to do with it when you got in the Army, and then you're now into engineering. And so thank you for your service, first and foremost. I think that's awesome. And so you went to the City of Springfield, and it looks like you were you worked your way up. You were operations manager, street superintendent, it looks like. Can you talk about when you became an operations manager, what that experience was like when you got in the public sector? Because coming from military to public sector had to be kind of an eye-opener, I would assume.
Yeah, it was a big transition. Stepping out of the uniformed services is a big culture adjustment to become a civilian, just like everyone else is.
Yeah.
And I've been in uniform for 12 years, 8 years on active duty and 4 at the military academy. And that defined my entire adult life at that point because I enrolled at the military academy at 18, graduated at 22, and then left the Army with a young family. And that was all that I'd known as an adult to that point. And getting used to at the tender age of 30 of civilian life and a civilian workforce is a very, very different thing. The Army is an up or out organization. You have an entire career spans 20 years from start to finish, and that's a successful career. So one could enlist in the Army at 18 and retire at 38 with a military pension, and that's then get on with Act 2 of their life. And here I was at 30, starting a whole new thing over again with a workforce that was significantly older than I was, enjoyed much longer tenure in their jobs and responsibilities. And what that meant was they brought a lot more experience, and I had to figure out how to value that experience in a way that I wasn't used to. And that was the biggest adjustment for me was getting used to the idea of people that there's a inherent order and discipline to military life that is not quite the same in the civilian employment sector.
Right.
Employees still have to do what you say, but there's a lot less that a civilian employer cares about than the military does. It exercises a lot of jurisdiction over a soldier's life that is just none of your business to a civilian employer. And you know, paying less attention to all of those things around me took a little bit of time for that shine to wear off. I benefited from a very good mentor, the then assistant public works director, a gentleman by the name of Phil Broyles, took me under his wing, and really coached me out of a lot of what I would call bad behavior and legacy conduct from military styles of leadership. And finding those commonalities, leadership with a capital L is the same no matter where you are, but how you do it and how you interact with people is across between different kinds of work groups and different kinds of cultures.
Right.
That's very different and took me a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah. I was just grinning and smiling just because I can only, because growing up the way I did through public works, I kind of can only imagine coming from the military and what it's like in the public sector, like you described. It's very challenging. You have habits that are put in place already with some of the workers that are already out there doing the job. And then being a younger, engineer coming into that position, you would have been looked at as, probably going to cause problems for that, that habit that was established, right? Excuse me. So those kind of things is important to understand because it's super challenging for someone like yourself, and having a mentor had to be a huge relief, I would assume, over off of your shoulder, so to speak, because it can be super challenging. You're always going to be grilled on like what you don't know enough. You're not, you're smart enough. You're an engineer. What do you know? That kind of stuff. I can only imagine. So then you moved your way up, superintendent of streets. Now, did you just, as you gradually learned more about public works, different parts of infrastructure, you didn't have a background in streets, but that's where you moved into, and then you became an assistant director. What did you like about being a street superintendent?
I benefited from landing at the City of Springfield at a very good time. There were a couple key retirements and departures along the way. So in a very short period of time, I went through three different roles, each with each promotional and an expansion of responsibility. It took me a long time to figure out that was not the typical experience in the municipal sector.
Right, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, and even then, the penultimate job that I held in the City of Springfield was for 4 years. I was the assistant director. To that point in my life, that had been the single longest time that I'd had one office, because over 8 years in the Army, I had 10 or 12 different jobs, moved a couple times, went back and forth to Europe and back, went to 6 countries while I was in Europe, and in just one 3-year period.
Right.
And here the pace of life in the municipal sector is much slower, and having had only one job that had I think in my entire time in the Army, I think the longest I had one job was 2 years, and then 4 years, the longest in the City of Springfield as the assistant director.
Yeah.
What I really enjoyed about the challenge of public works in the part that I was in, I was the assistant director for operations and maintenance, and the biggest chunk of that was the streets division. It's a large work group. Springfield is a city of 160,000, and there's 100 men and women in the streets division at the time that I was there. And that's a lot of moving parts and pieces. It's a lot to pay attention to, but that's kind of where I think I've found what I consider to be my sweet spot of value that I add to an organization is in that large work group management.
Right.
Finding and figuring out the personnel dynamics and what makes teams work and why they work, and figuring out that not everybody needs to be or wants to be led in the same way, and adjusting that leadership style to that. So I really enjoyed that piece of the large work group leadership. I also enjoyed the fact that there's one of my favorite things about public works. And I learned this as the operations manager in that first role in Springfield, and every successive role in there just multiplied the feature of variety.
Yeah.
No 2 days are the same in public works in almost any of the fields of public works, but particularly with streets and operations and maintenance side of the responsibilities of a public works department. No 2 days are the same. And if you ever get tired of what you're doing now, you just give it 5 minutes and something else will come up. And it's great for those of us with ADHD because there's shiny objects all over the place to distract us from, this thing that's going on right now is okay. Well, I can put that aside, and here's a new thing.
Right.
Emergencies happen. Pipes break or potholes open up in weird places. It's sinkholes and all the things that don't fit into anyone else's neat little box usually wind up in the lap of the operations team in a public works department, and that's kind of where I like to be.
That's interesting you say that, because that's what I found out of public works and in the fire department. I volunteered and stuff like that. Every day was different, right? Always something coming up, or emergency would happen, or you're putting out fires. You're trying to stay proactive and do maintenance and things, but things change every day. You don't have the same crews doing the same things because other things happen, and you got to send them to different places. So you're right on. That's that's a sweet spot for someone like just looking to handle different problems and segment them and prioritize them and then get them done as quickly as possible. So this is where you got your leadership skills developed. It sounds like, out of the superintendent spot, the operations spot, and then you moved yourself up to the assistant public works director in Springfield. Is that where you started doing your publications, the leadership publications that you have?
That was where I began getting more engaged in the American Public Works Association.
Okay.
And that's really the entree into sharing what I've learned with others has been through the association. I think again it was back at the encouragement of my first assistant director at the time to get involved with the Missouri chapter of the American Public Works Association. And help the chapter write a strategic plan. This would have been while I was still serving as the street superintendent. And then a leadership opportunity in the chapter that coincided with that superintendency, and then also the promotion to assistant director. And that's where I've learned that what I had to share was valuable to other people based on feedback that I got from other peers. I started presenting at Missouri chapter APWA conferences, and then just began sharing that with a larger audience through the American Public Works Association, and just trying to keep staying responsive to what people tell me based on what I've either written or presented. I've had the chance to go to state level association conferences through APWA as far apart as California and Florida. A couple times in Florida, and was hosted by the Southern California chapter about a year ago. So literally coast to coast with sharing, my lessons learned from my leadership experience with others, and connecting with people through APWA has been a great avenue for building those relationships that allow those connections to turn into an opportunity to share those, either through written articles or through conference presentations.
Now I'm thinking about it, the Public Works, American Public Works Association, like you just said, it's a place where everybody in similar interests, right, or similar problems and struggles. It's a support system too. We're educating and also getting connected with people under the same stresses of being a public works director, for example, because you can't always rely on, all the colleagues within the city you're working at. You're getting different perspectives from different parts of the country on how they handle the same kind of situation. So that the American Public Works Association is a great place for public works directors to connect to. And I would assume most public works directors are in there. Is that the case, or is not every public works director involved?
Not everyone.
Okay.
It's got a robust roster membership. There's 30,000. Ostensibly there's 30,000 public works agencies across the country.
Yeah.
APWA has 30,000 members, not quite one-to-one correspondence,
Yeah.
but a lot of communities find it very valuable. It serves as more of a kind of an umbrella organization because public works means a lot of different things in different communities.
Yeah.
In almost every community, a police department in one community looks like the police department in another community, and ad infinitum across the country. Same with fire departments; they're all fairly much the same. Health departments look a lot alike.
Yeah.
But public works departments are almost all entirely different. There's
Yeah.
30,000 different ones across the country, and they're all different. So
Yeah.
what public works means in different communities, or if it's been transitioned over decades into public services or split into a transportation department and an environmental services department, there's a lot of different flavors to what a capital P, capital W public works agency has been turned into over the time. And we try to service, APWA tries to service the larger, broader community with relevant education, credentialing, and training that's useful to as many people as possible. There's a lot of specialty associations inside the kind of public works umbrella that are more narrowly focused, whether it's solid waste or clean water or transportation engineering or civil engineering. Those more narrow constituencies in the broader public works field. So we're trying not, the APWA tries not to compete with those people. So that's kind of where I think some of my most valuable contributions have been focused on leadership, because that's almost universally applicable. Everybody typically feels like they still need to work on their leadership skills. We all suffer in a little bit from imposter syndrome, and crafting leadership and management training and education has been what I've spent the last several years working on the association's behalf to.
I just interviewed a coach, a strategy coach, leadership coach here in the city of Aurora, Illinois. Her name is Mary Clark, and we were talking about, public works leaders or governmental leaders. They need help too. It's a struggle sometimes to just be in that leadership role and not understanding how your employees kind of perceive you, right? Your leadership style and what that looks like. Sometimes we need what she called it a 360 view of what's your blind spots and what's going on. And I thought that was unique. And I'm going to launch that podcast in the next couple of weeks or so. But this sounds like something that you grew up in the city, you had a mentor, you joined the American Public Works Association, you had that guidance and leadership to get you to where you are now, the public works director for the, Des Moines, Iowa, which is fantastic. And what are some of the challenges that you faced along this experience in this road, besides obviously going into the leadership role, and obviously when you're an operations manager, learning how to become a leader, but also now as you're the public works director, what are some of the challenges you're facing?
Some of my personal challenges of building a career in public works started, ironically, for a civil engineer with a technical deficit. I came into public works having no experience with any of the technical skills that I was now responsible for. So I had to acquire all that information entirely on my own, so that in whether at the time it was pavements and utility repairs and stormwater. I didn't do any of that in the Army, and though I was licensed as a professional engineer, I'd never sealed any construction documents in my entire life.
Right.
I'd taken and passed a test, which is kind of like college. And by a quirk of state law in Missouri, I was eligible to take the PE exam. But I knew, ethically speaking, I had no business practicing engineering until I'd filled those technical deficits. And then you couple that with the cultural deficit that I had mentioned earlier. I had a lot of learning to do, and I think that put me into a good state of mind that I wasn't the expert here to tell the work group, here's my wisdom from on high, and you're gonna take it and like it.
Right.
I deliberately courted a collaborative kind of arrangement to try to learn as much as I could. Like I said earlier, many of these people had been in the same role for a very long time compared to
Yeah.
what I was used to in with very short tenures in any given job in any military situation.
Right.
I was now working with supervisors that had been supervisors almost as long as I'd been alive,
Right.
and here I am. They at the tender age of 30, telling them how to do their job.
Right.
That's not going to go over very well
No.
if I don't find ways to collaborate and court their good opinion, and figure out how to lead them, because it's a completely different ballgame. I think that, in fact, in my first year there, I was in Springfield. I was driving around with one of the supervisors, and he'd been there for decades, and he had a long beard on, and we were driving around and sharing each other's backstory just to get each other a little better, get to know
Yeah.
each other a little better. Um, and he said, "What year were you born?" And I said, 1974. He says, "Huh, I last shaved in 1973. My beard is older than you are."
Wow.
And I was like, duly noted.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've learned came to value other people's experience and let that speak into my own. I'm a creative problem solver. I like to think of new ways to do things, but I also am not deliberately seeking to do new things just because I have this great idea.
Right.
I tell my subordinates, when I have one of those ideas, I preface it by saying, "Here's a bad idea. What do you think about this or that or the other thing?" And I know, and I tell them, if it turns out to be a good idea, it will be because of the work of other people.
Right.
This is just the idea. And I've already described it as a bad idea. So if it actually turns out to be a bad idea, I'm like, oh, drop it. It's a bad idea. It's not
Right.
worth pursuing. And that unplugs the natural inclination to not want to tell your boss, no, that's a stupid idea, or we shouldn't do that. Like, I've already said, this is a bad idea. What do you think about
Right.
this?
Right.
And get some creative juices flowing. And in many ways, that my lack of experience in public works has also been a value there, because I can think of things creatively, not always correctly, but I'm willing to accept that my ideas are bad ideas on the front end. But maybe they could turn into good ideas if we massage it a little bit, incorporate other people's experience. I try to bring people into my decision-making process so that it's not just me locked in a closet with Mountain Dew and Pizza Hut and emerging with, here's the plan, go forth and do great things.
Right.
Here's my 100-page thesis for how this should be done. And I have, where there are very specific things, I've done that, but by and large, I try to have a big tent approach to decision making. That's built on coming to public works with an outsider's perspective, and lacking having both a cultural deficit that I needed to fix, and got some great coaching and mentoring from very experienced and wise leaders. And also a technical deficit of not really knowing what it was that I was doing, put me in a position where I had to learn from my coworkers around me. And I just tried to soak that all up so that I knew what was going on as well as I could, and tried to introduce that kind of style into my leadership approach.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great stories. Back then, I was born in '77, so back then, I grew up in public works when I was 15. My dad, water, sewer, treatment plant, operators, superintendent, stuff like that. So I got to grow up in that phase where that guy you described with the beard, that's that's the guys you met. Like, they were just hard guys, and just it's like you listened, or you basically got booted out, or you could never learn from that, because they wanted to teach. They were just rugged and tough to work with. Sometimes I was like, I just want to learn, but sometimes they didn't want to tell you because they didn't think you were, committed to doing the job or whatever.
Yeah.
It was very unique, just working with some of those guys back in the day. And how are things now with labor shortages and stuff like that? How are you, that's one of the big things a lot of public works are dealing, departments are dealing with, is labor shortages. How are you dealing with it?
We have fared better than many of our peer agencies.
Okay.
Um, and a large part of that is that the City of Des Moines is an employer of choice in our metro area, and in the different fields that we have, we do carry a vacancy rate, but it's typically smaller than what I've seen elsewhere. I've seen
Okay.
some agencies that just have just terrible luck trying to recruit,
Okay.
and agencies are poaching from each other. Now we are the benefit from being in a metro area, the central city in a metro area. So and we compensate accordingly,
Okay.
and that's been a big help in recruiting. Now we're not poaching from other agencies,
That's good.
but we will deliberately recruit in one of our business units. We will deliberately recruit because we from private competitors, and that's our solid waste team.
Yeah.
But our selling point there is not as much on wages as it is working conditions. I know working in the solid waste business in the private sector is it's a long work week with a lot of work that starts early in the day and can go for a very long time. It's a
Right.
very lucrative undertaking for people with a CDL, and it's a great way to make a lot of money. But it is a very time-consuming kind of situation. We only recruit from people with we require our solid waste collectors on the way in the door to have experience doing solid waste collection. So
Yeah.
we are poaching from the private sector. And
Yeah.
we pay well, not as well as they do, but our selling point then is working conditions. It's typically 40 hours a week, and that's our expectation. And they get the solid waste business done in 40 hours, and then they go home and
Yeah.
get to enjoy a predictable amount of time off, and that's valuable enough to them to recruit people to work for less money doing the same job.
Right.
In other parts of our workforce, our biggest shortage is usually in the most labor intensive roles in our streets team. Patching potholes, is probably our highest turnover team. As people will enter into that, they will then try to promote out into other vacancies across the department.
Okay.
Uh, and that's, I think, a fairly typical sort of experience. So that's usually our way in
Yeah.
for those that are seeking full-time employment at the City of Des Moines. We pay well for the work, and we know we're competing with private construction companies for laborers, and
Yeah.
our maintenance worker teams are filled from workers from private construction companies. But we have a very strong training program to build our future leaders and
Yeah.
our future equipment operators. Our skilled labor almost exclusively comes from those who have come in the door at a lesser skilled and lower paid and oftentimes harder working position, and they kind
Yeah.
of prove themselves and work their way up, and we try to take very good care of them. The most common way people leave here is through retirement, and
Mhm.
I take that as a sign that what we're doing is good to retain workers, because we try to take care of them,
Yeah.
and with good work that's interesting to do, valuable to the community. It's compensated appropriately. We have decent benefits, I think we have a good culture in my department. There's not a lot of negativity, and that's an important part of wanting to come to work each day. And the last little piece of workplace culture and recruitment and retention evidence that we are here in the Public Works Department of the City of
Uh-huh.
Des Moines doing at least a decent enough job is that for the rare departures that we have for people that go to the private sector out of our workforce, a fair number of them ask to come back.
Wow.
Some years later, if we lose a truck driver to a private company, I've had more than one want to come back. Equipment operators that have moved across the country and decided to come back. And hey,
Wow.
can I have my job back? Well, it depends on
Hey,
how you did when you were here.
Jonathan, that's a great leadership,
So
man.
it's
People that want to come
I think
back.
it's a good way, a good testimony that we've got a good culture here. It's something that our current employees see, that when people leave, sometimes they want to come back. Not exclusively. Not
Yeah.
everybody that leaves wants to come back. Especially in our professional and paraprofessional ranks. This is a municipality, there is only so much room. And you could pigeonhole someone in a position for years at a time, just because the people in front of them are just not old enough to retire, and there's no
Right.
growth in the work group to speak of. The city of Des Moines is a stable, a stable population. We're not, as the central city, we're not growing gangbusters like our suburbs are.
Right.
So there's not going to be organic growth and see the potential for promotion there like you would see it in one of our suburban communities, where over the next 10 years they're going to double in size. Correspondingly, the public works department will have to ostensibly double in size. We don't
Yeah.
have those kinds of opportunities available, so some of our professionals and paraprofessionals will jump around to other communities at the promotional opportunity, and I can't begrudge them that. I that's what brought me to Des Moines in the first place, was
Yeah.
the prospect of staying the assistant director for 25 years didn't appeal to me, and a position opened up in Des Moines as a public works director, and I had to relocate my entire family to take advantage of that. But I don't begrudge anybody the portability of their around the profession. We wish them well. We're all training each other's replacements, is how I think.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. You're spot on there. Great job, leadership wise, in the city. People don't readily just say they want to go back to a city to work. Great job. Kudos to you for that. And I want to pivot a little bit to climate change real quick. Run out of time on the podcast, but I did want to talk about that, because I know you've been getting a lot of rain events, storm events, things like that coming into Iowa's been hammered the last couple of years. It seems like I've seen reports and stuff. How are you adopting to this climate change that's happening? Because some of our infrastructure undersized, right? So it can't handle these storms. What are the things you're putting in place for that?
One of our biggest challenges with climate change is that the upper Midwest is seeing more frequent and more intense rainstorms, larger overall precipitation, and more of it being delivered all at once, which increases our likelihood of flood risk. Des Moines is a river town. It's at our downtown is at the confluence of two rivers, and that may not be a great place to put a city, but nevertheless,
Right.
there it is. So Des Moines famously had in the great Midwest flood of 1993, lost its water plant for 2 weeks, and so 500,000 people with no drinking water for 2 weeks. Millions, if not billions, of dollars worth of damage. Then, and another even bigger flood in 2008, where there was a levee failure with an actual higher crest than the floodwaters in '93. So decades worth of flood control work in Des Moines, and building on that for the next generation of flood control. We're in the middle of a $150 million project to raise our levees to meet the new higher standards that we'll need to have to afford a reasonable level of protection to our residents behind them. There's billions of dollars worth of real estate protected by those levees, so it is a major part of our responsibility to future-proof our community. We know things are going to get worse before they get better, if they get better, and are investing accordingly to take our 1960s and 1980s vintage levees and not just build them to satisfy the needs of today, but also building in extra protection and additional freeboard so that they're prepared for a future. We get a longer life out of them and protect against a greater and more likely massive flood event. That's traditional river flooding. We're also seeing torrential downpours come with higher intensity and more frequency, and hitting undersized stormwater infrastructure that was built in the 1920s or 1930s. Des Moines is an old town. It was founded in the 1830s, 1850s, somewhere in there. And it was 200,000 people in the 1950s. Still 200,000 people, but these neighborhoods were built for the city of the current size. It was decades ago. So long before the practice of stormwater engineering became what it is today. So we're going back and fixing the problems that were adequate for the 1920s and 1930s, and we're now seeing rain events that our ancestors didn't see. And we are needing to upsize our sewers storm sewers that go right through very established neighborhoods. In some cases, our stormwater infrastructure was built in the 30s out of wood and reached the end of its life. And back in the 30s, the WPA would take a creek and build a wooden box culvert that followed the creek. And then we drop a neighborhood on it with the north-south streets that are the traditional neighborhood design that everybody loves.
Right.
But here in Des Moines, we've got a neighborhood that's blocks away from the river, high ground, but the watershed of the neighborhood is in the floodplain because the creek is a 3x5 box, and sometimes the water needs more than 3x5 to get out. So we're investing $20-30 million to add stormwater capacity to a neighborhood that the reason it floods is the stormwater system. It's not the river. It's there used to be a creek, and now it's a stormwater system that's almost 100 years old, undersized, at the end of its life. Wood and water won't coexist forever, and just trying to build our way out of a century's worth of undersized storm sewers.
System. Yeah, that's a struggle, man. And then how do you prioritize that? And we could talk a lot more, and we're out of time, but I got some more questions about that, but we'll do that for another day, Jonathan. I appreciate your time, and it's been super insightful of your life and how you got into public works and your experience and your leadership skills are showing, and you're doing a great job. So thank you so much for joining me. And then how can everybody get a hold of you? I think most of your stuff's on LinkedIn, but what's a good place to reach out?
Anyone can find me easiest on LinkedIn. Also, the City of Des Moines website is easy to remember. It's dsm.city. And you can navigate through there to find my contact information. I'm easy to find on the internet. There's not a lot of Jonathan Ganos in the world. It's an easy name to search.
Is there anything with APWA you got going on you want to talk about, or just throw out there?
Yeah, I'm coming to the end of a 6-year term on the Leadership and Management Committee. That's the work, the assignment that brought the publishing responsibilities to get all those leadership articles out. We are coming also to the end of the culmination of several years worth of work on the leadership framework that the association will be using for the next 20 years on how it teaches leadership, how it teaches management, and how it teaches supervision. The third installment of that is featured the successful supervision following mastering management and learning leadership. It's the inspiration for a year's worth of articles in the APWA Reporter, and those that are in the association or wish to attend to our annual conference in San Diego in August will get to come and hear a live presentation about it. But it's the tools that any leader would need to build leadership skills, management skills, and supervision skills in their team, in themselves, and help train and educate others on how to do what we need to do better.
It's exciting stuff, Jonathan. You're doing great things and leading the next generation to public works for the future. So thank you so much for that. And have a great day. Have a great weekend. Have a great spring break. And hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. We hope that this show brought you some insight on relevant topics within the infrastructure world. Please join us every 2 weeks on Tuesday for the next episode. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, please set up a 15-minute interview with your host at calendly.com/Chad Smelter.